Hello, hello, hello. My name's Pero Draculea, and welcome to today's video. Now, we are starting kind of a new thing. Well, sort of, kind of, not really. Just gonna get right into it, and we'll start by just putting the story title in here. So, last Monday, the last couple Mondays, I've been doing Thanksgiving in Ratsville. And that I'm going to keep doing, but off camera, I think. Because it's a little weird in the summer to be doing drawings about Thanksgiving. Now, that story, Thanksgiving in Ratsville, was originally written for a little short story compilation I'll be releasing called A Year in Ratsville. Although I think actually I've got enough stories, either written or half written, for 2 volumes of that. So I think I'm going to put Thanksgiving in Ratsville in the second volume, and the October story for the first volume will be, I forget the exact title, but it's Ricky and Baby's Halloween. So, anyways, I thought, since the gist of the book is that we go through a year in Ratsville, where Ricky and Miles and Baby and all of them live, and I thought, well, I'll have a story per month and then 12 illustrated stories. I think I initially thought I was going to put in like 25, like 2, maybe even 3 stories per month, and I realized if I'm going to add illustrations, that book would be massively huge, to the point of possibly being uncomfortable in the hands. So, that's my excuse why I'm going to do 2 books instead. So, anyways, I thought what I would do on Mondays from now on is we will go month by month. So, and kind of match what we're doing in the videos to the story for that month. So the story for July in that book is going to be Jeff versus Big Mike. It's not the first Ricky B, the rock and roll rat story I wrote, but I think is like the second. First one I wrote was Ricky B Goes to Sea, which I'm now making into a graphic novel. Anyways, the second one is Jeff versus Big Mike, and it starts, it's not one that specifically has to be in July. I just figured that was a good place to put in the book. But, as I've discussed on the Friday Ricky streams, Ricky works in a recording studio. He's the gopher, basically, called a runner. And, sometimes in between fetching beer and pizza and stuff like that, the runners, especially if they're also assistant engineers or audio engineers, or they want to become assistant audio engineers, sometimes they get tasked with duties inside of the studio. And, if they're more inclined to the engineering, it'll be stuff like wrapping up cables and all that. But sometimes they get jobs like what Ricky is doing here, which is he's rolling joints for the next studio session. And that's kind of how the story begins, is that he is rolling joints, and then, Big Mike comes in and yells at Ricky to go clean his car. Anyways, there's the whole thing. But I think I'm just going to, for the next 3 Mondays, or today and the next 2 Mondays, we will have 3 different scenes from that story illustrated. Now, this one actually isn't the earliest one in the story. It's one that probably of the 3 would be in the middle. But it's one that I thought was a good place to start. So we're starting drawing Ricky, and then on this side, he sort of shows up a little bit in the blue underdrawing. This is Jeff, who's the mix engineer who hangs out at the studio. Now, Jeff is also the nephew of Big Mike's wife, Brandy. We will see Brandy in next week or the week after. I haven't decided yet which order, but Brandy does show up. We've met her in the Ricky B Goes to Sea stories. She's a piece of work. But then so's Big Mike, so they kind of deserve each other. Anyways, the general gist of the story is that Ricky is rolling joints for another producer. Big Mike is a record producer. He owns the studio, but he rents out the studio to his producer friends. So Ricky is rolling joints for when Simpin' Simon comes in. Presumably, Simon doesn't know that they call him Simpin' Simon behind his back. He thinks they just call him Simon, or Cool Guy Simon, or Stud Simon, something like that, But anyways, Simon likes smoking weed, so Ricky is rolling a ton of big fat joints for the week ahead, so that they will be ready. And this pen is already starting to get a little gummy. That's okay. So while I'm off to the side swishing my pen, what it is I have bowls of water. I actually have 3 of these bowls. So I have one that'll get really nasty and black, and then I have one that I kind of put the semi-clean brushes into, or not brushes. Well, we may have a brush. No, actually for this one we won't. I have another one that's semi-clean and then kind of the most clean water for at the end. I'm using a dip pen. I'm using India ink. This is Demco. This is the stuff I use. Super black works as well. I use super Speedball Super Black for many years. I haven't been as happy with it the last few bottles I've had, so I heard good things about Demco and I decided to give it a try, and I like it better, so this is what I'm kind of working with. Now, the nibs, I have a whole bunch. There's the whole thing. This little dude is Larry Marv, so that's Miles's dad, for those who have seen my other Monday streams with the Miles Marv's Pursuit of Happiness. This is Miles's dad, so we've seen him in cartoon form. I made this in a pottery class a while back where we had to make 3 little pinch pots and arrange them in somehow, so his face is also a pinch pot, just upside down. Anyways, you can get the pen and nib kits on Amazon or Michael's, or most, I would assume, probably all art supply stores, unless you had one that was like very specific to painting. I don't know, or very small. Like there is a framing shop in my town that also sells art supplies, and I have no idea if they sell these pens or not. I wouldn't even kind of bother them to ask. But I use a few different nibs. The particular nib that I'm using at the moment is a Hunt 513 EF. I think they call it the wide bowl, something like that. But I used to only have one of them, and I absolutely had it for like 20 years. I love it. It's still great, but it's kind of getting clogged up. And then I finally was able to get out the magnifying glass, or the reading glasses and the magnifying glass, and I saw, okay, it says Hunt 513 EF, and it's globe bowl pointer. So I looked up where to get them, and I saw on eBay where some art supply store was selling like boxes of a dozen of them. So I was like, sold. So now I have a bunch to switch between. It's kind of my favorite main liner tool. And for stuff like Ricky's jacket here, because it's a leather jacket, so you'd have like, you know how leather gets when it gets kind of, folds up and whatnot around your body. It tends to be kind of stiff and rough. Well, rough isn't the right word, but it doesn't suck down to the body very well. So it gets highlights also because it's shiny. I'm having trouble talking today. Anyways, so I kind of like using the thinner one like that. Sometimes, if probably on Jeff's pants, I'll use a wider nib that kind of puts a thicker line, and then it doesn't look as, it comes across as less shiny. But that's totally personal preference, right? And style. So I kind of try and have my scribbling strokes, whatever you want to call them, kind of sort of echo the shape, the form. So like here, this part is kind of a more vertical part of his jacket, whereas, you know, there around his elbow, I was kind of going back and forth in different directions. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that since Ricky's in a rock and roll recording studio, the couch he's sitting on is probably also black leather, as they usually are. So I may be using this nib quite a lot in this area. In fact, I think, yeah. The other thing I like to do sometimes is I'll scribble in with something like this and then can always kind of go over it if I'm feeling that it needs some darker or more solid blacks. I can go over it with a thicker nib. So, and yeah, so the reason why I'm pre-recording this video instead of like doing it live on Monday night is, I talked about this in a blog post I just put, although I don't think I've linked to it. I haven't linked to it on YouTube. I only have it on my Substack. But I've been kind of thinking over the last couple of weeks, really, in terms of the amount of time I spend on live streams versus, you know, the scheduling impacts that has. And I do think that YouTube treats live stream numbers differently and whatnot, and a live stream audience when it's live is different from the replay audience, which is different from when it's just a straight video upload, you know what I mean? So, but mostly it's about the scheduling. So I've decided probably what I'm going to do, well, definitely what I'm going to do, at least for the summer, and I'll sort of see how that plays out, is for Monday through Thursday, instead of live streaming on those days, I will pre-record a video working on one page, upload that. So it does mean that I'm showing less work on YouTube, even though I'm doing the same amount behind the scenes. But, you know, instead of, say, inking 3 pages on a stream, I would just be inking them off stream, and then I'll film and post. I may actually film all 3 and like post them a week apart, but in terms of what I show, it's only going to be 1 page per week. I also think that that kind of makes it a more kind of a bite size. I say this, and who knows, this page may take me an hour to finish. I know I've been talking for almost 13 minutes and drawing for almost 13 minutes. But I think, you know, sometimes if it's like a 2-hour long video, somebody might be interested. And it's like, oh, I don't have the time right now, you know. Whereas if it's, you know, a 45-minute or something, then be like, oh, okay, I can sit down and watch that or listen to it in the background or whatever. So I'm going to experiment, see if if doing shorter videos and pre-recording them ends up working better. So what Ricky's got here on his lap is a cookie sheet. And that is a nod to a former friend of mine. Not that I had like a falling out with him. We just don't hang. We lost touch because we don't travel in the same circles. But he was an assistant engineer to fairly big time, well, more of a mix engineer. So a guy more like Jeff here rather than a actual, well, dude was a record producer. Anyways, it doesn't matter. my buddy was the dude's assistant. And his personal assistant, not one who worked in a studio. Because some of them will have their own assistants that travel with them. And then, like, the studio assistant would still help out on sessions, but, would be kind of subordinate to the personal assistant. Anyways, it all gets all very hierarchical. But one of his jobs as the assistant was rolling joints. And at one point, he made a comment that what you really want is a tray, either a cookie sheet or a tray, because I guess you get a lot of crumbs when you're rolling that stuff. But if you have a cookie sheet or a tray, something that has a lip on it, right? Then the crumbs will stay with you on the tray. And then apparently he insisted that by the end of the week it was equivalent to getting one free joint. So, anyways, I'm assuming that Ricky has heard similar wisdom from his superiors and from other assistants. So, show some random crumbs as well as some actual buds. Okay, well, I'm not really a weed person, personally. I'm a sugar. My addiction is sugar, which I'm trying to kick. I think anyone who's seen my streams and seen me on camera can kind of guess at that. It's like, oh yeah, she likes sugar. But what Ricky's got here is basically a blunt. But anyways, I certainly had a lot of friends who smoked a lot of weed back in the day. So I assume my understanding is you, generally speaking, don't want to leave your stuff out and about because it'll go stale, I guess. But Ricky's rolling like tons of them to put away for the week, so I assume it's going back into a Ziploc after he's done. So yeah, we'll kind of have. Just for detail's sake, I think it's kind of interesting to have Ricky with his jeans torn at the knee. And this is a case where we're going to move to a different nib. We'll come back to that one. So it's soaking in the middle bowl. And leaving it soaking. I mean, like, you wouldn't want to leave your nibs in water for, overnight or something like that. That would be bad. They will rust. Even sometimes, like, I have an ultrasonic cleaner that's actually kind of more for like manicure tools, but I use it for my nibs. And it's very low powered, so sometimes I leave it running with my nibs in it for like a whole afternoon, and definitely, there's a little bit of orange coming out when I'm patting them dry on the paper towel. But it also helps get just that little bit of dried ink crud out of them. But anyways, leaving it soaking in that other bowl for, 5 minutes or whatever, won't even be that long, kind of works well because the soaking time allows the ink that's starting to dry in the nib to kind of leach out. Whereas if I just swished it and then dried it with a paper towel and put it down, there's definitely still going to be ink crud in there and it's going to dry. At some point, I think I have promised before that I will at some point do like a tutorial, like a traditional comics process tutorial, going over everything. That'll probably be on. I have a separate channel that I've set up for like comic world building and character development tips and all that, and then I just haven't gotten around to really populating it. But that's where I would put tutorials. But the basics are, I'm working on Bristol board. Back when I was first doing Llama the Destroyer 20 years ago, I did this kind of dip pen work on just plain old cheap crappy sketchbook paper. So you absolutely can. Bristol board is a little thicker, and if you, especially when you have the really smooth Bristol board, and some of what, I'm not going to go on the rant, but some of what is now labeled as smooth Bristol board, honestly, when I compare it to the smooth Bristol board I was using 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, it's nowhere near as smooth. So things have changed, but I would say personally, you probably really want to avoid vellum surface. I have used it at times if nothing else is available and I really needed Bristol board. What I run into though is that the vellum surface, especially with the pokier nibs like this one, it really digs into the vellum surface. It doesn't skim over as well as it does on a smooth surface. So, you know, but the vellum surface is great if you're doing marker work or, you know, using or pencil, especially if you're using pencil graphite, then you kind of want that toothy texture. But for ink, I think the smoother the better. Okay, so we're going back to this. So this has been soaking, and funnily enough, even though when I swished it in the first bowl and it all looked like it was clean or whatnot, but right underneath where this nib was sitting in the water, there is, if I pick it up, it's going to swirl, so it's going to vanish, but there's like a black area where the water's turned gray. So it definitely did help to get some of the goop out. So anyways, we're going to continue on. Some of these videos, what I'll end up doing is I'll just draw and not talk, and then, or periods where I am drawing and not talking, I'll just like speed it up in the editing. So you still see what I'm doing, but not have to, you know, it'll be faster. But for this one, because this is actually the first of this series, and I'm trying to talk and explain a lot, you know, I'm trying to talk my way through it and hopefully provide some useful information and context. So this one which means also this video is probably going to be a fair bit longer. I think I will go over the couch, at least partially. If you're wondering, by the way, if you're new to my, oh no, it does show up. So that's just a shot glass that I have my ink in. Makes it so much easier versus like the bottle has a really narrow neck, and the Demco bottles are kind of tall and a little bit tippy, you know, if you mess with them. Speedball at least has, you know, it's a fairly low center of gravity because of the shape. But anyway, so the shot glass kind of works well. I put about a ½ inch worth in, and then at the end, whatever I don't use, I pour back into the bottle, which maybe isn't the best thing to do because it will have started to dry and get a little thicker from evaporation, even just over the course of an hour or something. But, you know, then I just shake it really well when it goes back in the bottle, and it's less wasteful than if I was to pour out the excess every time. I think initially I used to, like, that bottle, I have a giant bottle of the Demco India ink just over that way. But I basically, I find this smaller bottle easier to use, so I just kind of refill it from the big one. I think this is like the third or fourth refill. Anyways. So, you're seeing that there. I'm going to just kind of change my direction of drawing because that kind of gives a little different texture. So what I'm going to show next is what Ricky's thinking. And for it to make sense, I'll just tell you that the gist of the story is that Ricky's boss, Big Mike, comes in and he's being a dick to people, but he's sort of bragging. It's like, I'm going easy on the kid, meaning Ricky, because I've been to see the Dalai Lama today. Hypothetically speaking, this may have been based on an actual incident I witnessed from an actual record producer many, many years ago. Anyways, so I borrowed from that. Although nothing else in the story really is based on reality, just that one little snippet. But anyways, Jeff in this story has also been to see the Dalai Lama. He is not impressed by Big Mike bragging about that. And then Big Mike asks where Jeff was sitting because he wants to kind of big man Jeff. And it turns out that Jeff was in the front row with his Dharma group. Meanwhile, Big Mike paid 10 grand for nosebleeds. And Jeff points out that he only paid $50 for front row, and he had been pretty sure he heard somewhere that the nosebleeds were going for 25. And that's about when all hell breaks loose. So, but later on, when Big Mike is out of the studio, Ricky's asking about Dolly. And Ricky has heard the story on the TV, on the television news, about this sheep named Dolly. So Ricky's very curious because he didn't know sheep could talk, which is extra funny, I think, when we consider that this is a world of talking rats, although they are basically humans with rat features, so, you know. But still, Ricky is curious, so he asks about that, and Jeff is explaining about the Dalai Lama, and, well, Ricky didn't know llamas could talk either. So that's what's going on in Ricky's brain. He knows what a llama is, of course, because, you know, he and his cousins like going to the Ratsville County Fair. There's a Ratland County Fair. I'll have to see, but that's the one that we will be doing illustrations from in September. So anyways, Ricky is familiar with llamas. He didn't know that they could talk. He did know they could spit, so. Anyways, he wants to know if the llama spit when they talk? I heard alpacas spit. Ricky has a bit of a southern accent. I don't know why, because Ratland isn't supposed to be anywhere near the deep south. And really, most of his cousins don't even talk like that. I'm guessing he must have seen a lot of Dukes of Hazzard when he was a little rat. And he thought that was a cool way to talk. So, there we go. Now, I am going to fatten up some of the darker spots in the sofa just so it's got a little more definition to it. It is a little bit tough when everything's kind of black on black like this to get the shading right, especially when you have to leave some black or some white spots like there under Ricky's butt to give the sense of the outline, right? It doesn't take much, but you can see it kind of does add to it. Now, we're not doing a fully detailed background. These guys are supposed to be sitting in the control room of Studio A at Rat Trap Studios, but control rooms are a pain in the ass to draw, so... And this, I mean, that's about, I've drawn it for 8.5 by 11, because that's the biggest that'll fit on my scanner. But it's probably going to get shrunk down to, like, I'm thinking, because it's a short storybook, it'll probably be trade paperback size, so 6 inches wide and 9 inches tall. I'm not going to do this as like a full bleed, because, you know, some of the critical stuff's going to be right in the middle. If I was going to do that, I'd do it on 2 separate pages and scan them separately and put together. So this will probably end up being a half page, you know, going across the bottom half of a story or something like that. So it'll end up being about 6 inches wide. So it'll be about roughly a quarter. Actually, it's going to be about a quarter of the size, which they do say that you should use the term should loosely. But it used to kind of be the standard that you would want to draw about 4 times bigger than the final size, and then you would reduce it. Let's give the indication of a tree in the background, just to give it a little something, you know. What else can I say? Oh yeah, so the underdrawing here is a non-photo blue pencil, because I was talking about like reductions. They used to do the reduction stuff on, you know, a Xerox machine. So, but anything, whether it's Xerox or scanner, if it's black and white, this light blue drawing is going to go away, especially on like this one. It's fairly light. I do have some of the Noah's Archipelago stuff where I kind of dug in a little too much with the non-photo blue pencil, and I'll show you. No, that's not the right color, but this is what I use, 919 by Prismacolor, because I have a lot of these and they're easily acquired. But I also have like some of the Staedtler phthalo blues. This one you have to be careful with. If you put too much pressure on, it will pick up. So, but if you're, you know, if you're sketching really lightly with it, it'll be fine. Anyways, even with areas where I've pressed that hard, usually when I scan in black and white, it still disappears. I have the odd bit where you have to go zooming in Photoshop and erase it, but generally speaking, as long as you're reasonable with it, you're fine. I am going to try and pick up this bowl very carefully and show you. So you can see that area. That's where this has been sitting and soaking. So that ink has come off even after having swished it around and wiped the excess off with a paper towel. This is now the first ink bowl. And then there's a third one that's completely clear that I haven't used yet. So that's the one I haven't used yet would be kind of at the very end when I'm basically doing my final clean of the brushes. I want to say brushes. They're not brushes. They're nibs. They're pens. But anyway, so I kind of wipe as we go. So we're kind of getting a little bit of a demo, but not really. Anyway, so there's Ricky. He's thinking about Dolly the sheep and a llama. Not to scale, obviously, but Ricky, you know, he knows a little bit about barn animals because he's been to the fall fair. But he and his cousins, when they get drunk, sometimes may or may not engage in cow tipping after hours, but depends who's asking. Anyways, Jeff, of course, is not talking about Dolly the sheep or llamas as in the wool-bearing creatures. is talking about the rat version of the Dalai Lama. I'm going to take a wild guess. It's probably kind of offensive to draw the Dalai Lama as a rat, but everybody in this world is a rat or a mouse. Although I do have reference to these guys, especially like Big Mike, going and working it down in LA. So there's some question about, is that a rat version of LA? Is that just, normal Los Angeles? Some would say there's no difference. Um, Certainly there are a lot of rats running around in LA. And I don't just mean, the Hollywood types. um, I mean actual rodents with tails. Um, but I still haven't decided uh, whether when they go there, whether they are still kind of, rat people and they let it show, or whether there's like regular people and they like stick their ears under hats and stuff like that to blend in, or what the deal is. At some point, I'll have to decide that. That would be like a story for the future, like the first time Ricky is invited to go along with Big Mike to Los Angeles to work. So there's... Now, for the current view, we don't actually see Ricky's tail because it's kind of out that way. But we do see our enlightened friend's tail, and we will see Jeff's tail. So I don't really expect to have this book, A Year in Ratsville, out until 2027, sometime at the end. Might not even be till 2028. Like, I'm planning book releases quite a ways out. But it kind of depends when I get things finished and whatnot. But I think that will be our Monday project from now on, or at least until the book is done. So we've got 3 Mondays left in July. So we'll have this, and then the next 2 weeks will be illustrations from Jeff versus Big Mike. In August, we'll have, I think there's 4 Mondays. So that's going to be the Ratlin Day Long Weekend story. Some of them will end up needing a lot more illustrations than just, 3 or 4. So some of that I may do off camera, or it may be, depending on schedule, that I just, next year we have another 4 illustrations in July, and kind of, I don't know, that kind of makes it feel like really long until the book's out. So we'll see. Jeff has his little pointy little goatee. Jeff, we usually see in a white t-shirt. T-shirts, very common studio attire in the music biz, although usually it's black t-shirts. Depends on the dude, though. Sometimes you even see them wearing golf shirts. And of course, Jeff is going to have his Buddhist prayer beads on his wrist. We'll draw the little tassel down there. Now in this illustration, Jeff doesn't look super fit. There's other stories where we kind of hear that Jeff works out a lot. So probably depends what kind of working out he does, and also even the time of the year, you know. And if he's like say a power lifter, power lifters usually aren't very ripped. Like they're super strong, but they're not exactly concerned about, you know, body fat percentage and having things show and be veiny and all that kind of crap. You know, that's more of a bodybuilder thing. So it could be that Jeff started out as more of a power lifter dude, and then later on got into bodybuilding. That could be part of his story arc. Basing Jeff's chair off of, I forget the name of it, but there's a specific kind of chair that the audio engineers really like. I mean, higher end studios will have them. Not everyone will. Some will just have, you know, whatever chair you frickin' get, you frickin' get. But there is one where it's like, it's a black plastic outline and then it's mesh in between. So if you're sitting for you know, 12 hours a day or longer on some of these recording sessions, they're good because they have, I'm actually going to use a thinner nib. This is like a crow quill, like the really little ones. Sometimes it draws for me, sometimes it doesn't, but basically we want it to be a very fine crosshatch. The actual pattern is kind of more like an up and down weave, but anyways, they have good ventilation and whatnot. Lumbar support isn't that bad. Although I did know one engineer who said he hated them because the seats are also the mesh, but then that means that right behind your knees, the backs of your thighs, if you're sitting in them for, you know, long times, as he does, that he would get bruises on the backs of his legs there. So anyways, we are going with the mesh chair because it's the sort of thing that Big Mike would want to have, I'm sure. One thing I find with these little crow quills is they're so sharp that they do start to gouge the paper, even on relatively smooth Bristol board. So then we've got the mesh. I'm not gonna, like, I think I said earlier, I'm not really gonna fill in much of a background. There would be on this side, we're assuming that Jeff is sitting at the mixing board. So there's an SSL board here. So you might see a whole bunch of dots or knobs and whatnot, but because the drawing's going to cut out, it's going to look weird if I actually put it in there without having it wide enough that you can see. There's probably rack gear back here, but again, I'll probably have a different drawing where I show that in context so that you kind of know it's there, but I think it's not that important for the purposes of this drawing. So maybe we're going to draw this version as the kind of this chair where the back is mesh, or which is kind of more of like the knockoffs of it. The back is mesh, but the front is kind of a typical fabric covered office chair. We'll fill in Jeff's pants with the other nib. Yeah, Jeff's really into, meditation and all that sort of stuff. He's the Zen dude. He does appear in Ricky B Goes to Sea. Though I think the page I've actually got him on is one that I actually inked way back when. So I'll show it on stream when I'm kind of inking the pages surrounding it, but Ricky tells him about the whole issue with the submarine, and Jeff kind of grabs his whiskers, puts his hand up and pulls his whiskers down and closes his eyes. She likes to do when he's thinking, and then he tells Ricky that what you see, the journey is the real destination, or something like that. And Ricky's like, but I gotta go to bottom of the sea and get this blah 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 blah. And Jeff says, what you seek will be found inside of you. And Ricky doesn't understand what the hell he's talking about at all. So I did miss my the Friday stream that was supposed to be a few days ago. It's kind of not feeling the greatest, so figured rather than risk another stream like I had a couple weeks ago where I got half an hour into it and I was like, I gotta go. I was like, you know what, let's just cancel it. Let's take a rest day. So at the time I'm recording this, I don't know whether I was able to do my recap video on Saturday night, my recap stream on Saturday night. But, oh yeah, I kind of didn't finish my thought from earlier about changes to my streaming schedule. So Monday through Thursday, now I'm going to pre-record. So it'll be something like this. It'll be shorter. Like this video, it's not quite an hour, and I'll be finished in a few minutes. So it'll be just under an hour instead of like a 2-hour stream. So, and just one page. But, you know, some of the other ones on, say, Tuesday or like the Zomo stream on Wednesday or whatnot, if I stick to the one page, they may be very short streams. So, and this is going to have, he's going to have at least one of those paddle thingies sticking out. But for the summer, or at least until I finish what I want to do for Ricky B Goes to Sea, that will remain as a live stream on the Friday nights. And then the recap video, I think I'm also going to keep as a live stream on Saturday nights. And then I do some doodling at the end of the Saturday video. So, but the other ones will be pre-recorded. And we'll see how that goes over the summer, you know. And I think it's going to, like I said, be more efficient. And plus, you know, if I'm streaming, I would like to pay attention to the chat. But then in order to pay attention to the chat, I'm constantly stopping what I'm doing and looking and reading or whatnot. Even if there's nothing there, I'm like stopping and glancing up, stopping, glancing up. So it's like, even as far as how, I don't know if that picked up on my mic. My computer is telling me that it's time for me to do some housework. We're going to ignore that. Anyways, so I think basically I'm saying I think I'll probably get more drawing done not doing it live, but we'll see. It is fun when to chat with people in the chat, especially, you know, some of my regulars and whatnot. Also, I get some folks that I know from other places, like Pavel. Actually, we're Instagram buddies. I don't think he uses Instagram anymore, though. So, you know, that's all fun. I just think, I don't know that timing-wise, it's been working for me to live stream 6 nights a week. Plus, you know, that means I haven't been to like the writers group that I belong to. I have not been since, I think it might have been once this spring. No, actually, I don't think I've been since October. Now, some of that is nothing to do with streaming, because it was before streaming and I had like a class or something like that, I think. But, you know, there are a couple groups that I belong to where the meetings are in the evenings, and I have not been able to go for the last 6 months. So I'm like, you know, time to kind of reevaluate whether, you know. So anyways, that's kind of a blathering, neither here nor there kind of thing. Let's put in a shadow. And also over here, because, you know, after all, Jeff is taking up more than just that. And I guess that means our Dalai Lama needs a shadow as well. Unless he's doing some like yogic flying or whatnot. But I don't think the Dalai Lama claims to do that. So there we go. And like that. And kind of. So there you have it. And like I think I'm gonna put one. I'm not gonna draw in the background too much, but I think it helps if there is like a horizon line. Also kind of thinking, you know what? All these studios. I said I was done and now I'm not. They usually all have like a Persian rug. Or not necessarily a real Persian rug, but, you know, like a wants to look like a Persian rug. the control room. That's kind of very common, so. I did not plan to do this, so. And they're kind of, we'll assume that goes all the way under the board, because that way Jeff is, he's not coming off of it when he's rolling around. Not going to worry about like the back wall though, because that might just kind of vanish off, and I may kind of like, yeah, depending where I put it, I may do some photoshopping to round out the thought bubble. Actually, why don't I try and do that? It's not going to quite work, but usually these things have kind of like a clearly not a proper illustration of a Persian rug, but I just want to kind of give the sense of one, right? Actually do have a, back in the day, I don't know if they still do, but IKEA used to, when I lived in Richmond, they used to have Persian rugs that would be kind of depending, price would be dependent on the size and whatnot, but 100% wool. I'm sure whatever they have now is probably all polyester, plastic, but I do have one that I had for my old jam space back in the days when I was in the music industry. Mine, though, I went for one that had a lot of geometric patterns inside, so it has a border and whatnot, but it's like, it's not the floral kind. Is there a detail nobody's going to notice or care really, but I'll notice. I will know that it's got an actual, that I took the time to make some scribbles that vaguely, sort of, kind of, not really look like a Persian rug, and then that feels more authentic. It's like that, and like the other thing you have to have, stereotypically, that you would have in a recording studio. Not all of them, but some of the ones I've been in, is that you would have lava lamps. So I'm going to use the, yeah, actually, I want the border to be very dark. I was going to use the thicker nib, but then I think it's going to look weird. Because this would have a lot of like little flowers, right? So I'm going to kind of scribble it in. I will say, not every recording studio. I used to sometimes hang around at Vaudeville, which is definitely a pro level studio, but he, the owner, did not have lava lamps. He had, was kind of like a, it's kind of more like a warm kind of, I want to say 90s exactly, but it was like burgundies and wood grain and whatnot. And then the lamps he had were ones that kind of, I think it was like a brass lamp. The base was like brass with like a camel on it. So it was like camel and palm tree kind of motif. very cozy kind of place. When he sold it, a different producer bought it. I think it's now called Echo something. I forget the name, but it's still in operation. It's just not called Vaudeville anymore. I think the new guy has made some aesthetic changes, but it's still, a lot of it's very similar, kind of with the rich, warm kind of colors and whatnot. Why do I feel like I'm gonna fill in the whole damn background? No. I'm going super light because I'm wanting it to just kind of give the sense of wood grain. Right, or planks or something like that. Are we gonna fill in the frickin'... Yeah, screw it. Screw it, screw it, screw it. We're gonna put in the friggin' rack gear. If you're gonna do something, do it right. Not gonna have stuff in the background though. This is just gonna be a dark corner over here. Okay, so if we have rack gear, there's usually like a kick plate underneath. Sometimes the rack gear will actually be on wheels, but you wouldn't really see that from the front. And there's going to be a shadow because there's a countertop on top of, at least the kind of rack I'm talking about has a countertop. And then where are our rack gears? Usually 19 inches wide. So we'll assume do the other ones there. And then this is the point where I pause for a second so that I can go pull up one of the images from my reference library of photos I've taken. Actually, it's probably going to be vaudeville. And then I will draw in the racks. One moment. Okay, references up. Let me expand so I can see. So we are going to add rack gear. But before we even do that, we're going to add a lava lamp, because if we're going for this level of realism, of course we're adding a lava lamp. Again, not all control rooms have them, but a whole lot of them do. So, this is now dried enough that I can kind of put my finger down on it. So, that, and like that, and like that, and like that. One lava lamp. And then over here we're going to have another lava lamp. This one's going to be bigger. I've seen some lava lamps that they're like 3 feet, 4 feet tall. And then you often sometimes see too. You want like wood dampening. I just actually remembered. I also have beer probably sitting over on that counter. It depends. Or sometimes Starbucks coffee. The reference photo I'm looking at was my friend's band being mixed by Dave Ogilvy at Vaudeville Studios, April 14th, 2011 at 1:36 p.m. So what's on the counter in this case is Starbucks. But we'll assume Ricky... Well, actually, no, this is supposed to be at first thing in the morning. So we'll assume that these guys are also kind of well behaved and they have coffee. And then what I was going to say is you also often will get sound dampening panels in the background. So those normally have a frame made of wood. And then what they have on the inside is probably going to be rock wool insulation or the pink insulation, something like that. And then they'll have some sort of a fabric covering. Vaudeville, Jonathan used some sort of orangey damask kind of fancy looking fabric. So we will, you know what, we'll borrow that for Rat Trap Studios. I'll just do this super light because then it kind of makes it more clear that's like a fabric pattern somehow. I don't know. Should post this and tag Jonathan and ask him if he recognizes it. He's one of the few people from my old music days I still have on Facebook. I'll just say thank you for the design inspo. So there. And you would normally have a bunch of these. So like in Vaudeville, they kind of alternated. I'm just gonna kind of put some shadow in there. Between like the damask and it looks like a navy blue, kind of a plain navy blue fabric. So well, you know, I said I wasn't going to do the background, but I do have to admit it looks so much better with the background than if I just left it white. I mean, sometimes if you're going to like trim out excuse me, a little edit there because I thought I heard my phone ring and it's in the it was in the other end of the house. I went and got it, and it was my dad calling to ask if I was stuck on the Malahat Highway, which is that highway from Victoria, BC up to where I live. And I try to avoid, I do go run errands in Victoria and stuff like that. But basically from May until mid-September, I avoid doing that on Friday unless it's like a dire, you must do it. And even then, I would go up to Nanaimo instead, just because the Malahat is hell on Fridays. Because, you know, everybody in Victoria wants to get the hell out of Victoria on a weekend. So, especially, you know, this time of year, people go camping and all that. So then basically you get to Victoria. If you're not out of there by noon on a Friday, you're gonna have a 2-hour drive home. Sometimes it's worse than that. So, I mean, sometimes you get lucky. Um, but also, like, I live in the Cowichan Valley. I think there's 100,000 people in this valley, and like 25,000 of them work in Victoria. So it's like, I don't know. That's a stat I have heard. I don't know exactly how accurate it is, but let me see. So if that one's that wide, that one's that wide, then we're gonna have like that. Okay. Um, but anyways, it is definitely rush hour is crazy. Um, uh, and then at this time of year, you also have like people escaping. So, anyways, there is talk about that. So that's why we had a little edit point there. So now I'm going to, for this one, I'm now going to repeat that pattern. Now I have to remember this for the next time I'm drawing the control room, because this is kind of be set it and forget it type of stuff. Like I mean, you could definitely. Basically, what it is the insulation that goes in there before you put it in the wood frame. You would basically wrap the insulation with the fabric, and then it gets stuck into the wood frame and then stapled or whatever. I'm sure there's tutorials online about how to do it, but and I mean, some people also make these thinner, and then what they have inside, instead of like 4 inches of insulation, they may have like, the acoustical tiles, the ones that are foam that kind of look like mattress toppers, where they kind of got that kind of a thing, because they're actually pretty thin. But you can tell, like, I'm pretty sure, if what I remember from Fogville, that was they would have been insulation, because they're flat. Like when you stretch fabric across here, you can definitely tell. You often see that on the linings inside of, say, a vocal isolation booth, if a studio has one. Anyways, so we've got one more of these guys that we need to draw. It's going to be the kind with like the dark blue or the dark fabric. It's going to be exiting behind Ricky's ear like that. Another little edit because I had a cough. Anyways, and then we'll scratch in to make this kind of a dark fabric area, which it's going to kind of blend in a little bit with Ricky's hair and Ricky's question marks. But that's kind of fun, because then they're less in your face because they're a little more buried. I think before I took that call from my dad, I think I was talking about the acoustical panels. That kind of makes sense for the fact that I was drawing them. But anyways, that's kind of the thing. Some people also, like, you can look online if you're wanting to get into audio or whatnot. Like, there's tutorials, I'm sure, on YouTube and whatnot. Some people use like lumber, like 4x4s, and cut them to different lengths, and like screw them all into like a backing piece of plywood. That kind of acoustical treatment is super heavy. But I've also seen years ago when I went to audio school, the live room was a little bit too live. And it was a place that it was Garth Richardson's private studio, and then he opened up his audio school, Nimbus. So what he had was, you know, he wanted to change the acoustical sound in the live room a little bit. So he had one of his assistants go through and put different bits of wood, and they would be different thicknesses. So it was like a shiplap wall, but didn't, you know, it was more like like it wasn't painted wood or whatever. So it didn't have like that distressed, chippy kind of Joanna Gaines look. But so it was different thicknesses and different wall strips and whatnot. And a couple of the interns, I think it was Nigel and Andrew, did it over a weekend and just covered that one wall, and then it sounded way better after that. I don't think I have any photos of that, but anyways. So we're drawing different rack gear on here, different compressors and effects units and stuff like that. So you kind of have, that's like a single height, and then there's a double height. You do have some pieces, I forget the name of them, the API EQ units were like triple height. But anyways, and I'm looking at my little reference from Vaudeville. I don't even, this would have to be an effects unit by the looks of it. Because I had like an LED screen, well, LCD screen. And then I had a bunch of buttons. And sometimes you'd have like a space that was empty. So we'll just kind of leave that one like that. But you could kind of see like that. And then they had a Joe Meek compressor. I have a Joe Meek compressor as well. In fact, mine, I think I bought mine when Mushrooms shut down. I think I got the compressor, the Joe Meek compressor from Mushroom, and then I also got an amplifier. It was a Mesa Boogie. So anyways, we'll just draw that, and then here, and just fill in with a couple random knobs. But yeah, I'm glad I talked myself into doing this, because it does look better. It does. It looks realer as well. Let's draw some API over here as I'm like squinting. But it was like a 8-channel EQ, so it had like that sort of stuff. What the hell was that? Don't think that picked up in the mic, but it sounded like a boom or a thud. Logo there. Oh, they had 2 different API units. Anyways, I don't remember what the other one was. So I'm gonna lay out some strips here. And then let's do an LA2A here. Probably gonna draw it wrong, but it's just a bunch of teeny tiny like that. And then this, I think, are effects units. They have green LCD screens that match. And then buttons. One of the local hills is on fire. I'm hearing planes going across. I mean, that could just be random small planes, but it's not really flying weather for like private hobby pilots because it's really cloudy. And it doesn't sound like the chopper that goes to the hospital. That sounds like the Water dumping planes. I could be wrong, though, of course. I'm often wrong. What else? Just kind of add some shadow in there. And what random other crap should there be? I don't know. Somebody should have their laptop open over here. It's a rat book. Or face rat. I'm looking at my reference photo, trying to figure out what the hell is over there. There's a bunch of like chargers for hard drives and stuff like that. My friend's head is in the way, so I can't really tell exactly. There's like 2 lamps. There is like a random vase with some like dried grasses for decoration. Sometimes, some studios would have like jar candles and that sort of vibe thing going on, but and then there's like notebooks and all that kind of crap. But I think we're going to leave it at that. So that is going to be our very first page from, well, illustration for the story, Jeff versus Big Mike. And there is, I mean, it's called Jeff versus Big Mike, but I mean, there's a verbal argument between Big Mike and Jeff at the beginning of the story, but the real fight is Big Mike versus Mrs. Mike. And that might be what we illustrate for next week. If not, it'll be the week after. It's definitely one of the ones I have blue lined and ready to go. So let me just kind of be sneaky and pop that here while I say I hope you've enjoyed today's stream and me blathering about studios and random other stuff. Yeah, let's go back to that. So, you know, I just slipped in my subliminal messaging about you will subscribe. You are getting sleepy. You want to subscribe and click like and tell all your friends. Anyways. All right. So next week we will have another illustration from Jeff versus Big Mike. And then for the rest of this week, we will be having Noah's Archipelago cast portraits. I've got one to finish this week and one for next week. We'll have on Wednesdays Zommel the Destroyer from Zommel World, probably just the one illustration per day, similar like we did today. And Thursday, on the Thursdays now, because we have wrapped up what I'm going to draw for the A to Z of Noah's jobs, at least what I'm going to draw in terms of on screen, we will start working on Noah's Book of Days. So back to the markers for the 1 day a week. I know some folks do like my color work, so hopefully you'll enjoy those videos. And those will all be pre-recorded Monday through Thursdays going forward. That's the plan. And then on Fridays, we will be inking Ricky B Goes to Sea, at least until I get as far as I want to get on stream in that project without giving away any spoilers. And yeah, the recap videos on Saturday nights will be live still. So thank you for watching. Always got to remember I have these little screens up. And what I will leave you with is the playlist link for A Year in Ratsville, because after all, the Thanksgiving in Ratsville videos I've been doing the last few weeks are on that playlist already. So we will just, and this is part of A Year in Ratsville as well. So we'll go from there. Thanks for watching. See you again real soon. Bye for now.